This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to A Geek Leader Podcast, episode 95. And today on the show, we've got Sergey Sundukovskiy, and he is the CTO and co-founder for RakenApp.com, which is a construction app. And he's got a lot of experience when it comes to startups and technology, and even taking companies through selling to a larger company. He had one of his companies that exited, and then he switched industries and started another company, which is pretty awesome. So he's got some great stories to tell about how to figure out what your product is, how to be a good leader to your team, how to grow your team, through technology. And being the CTO, he has lots of experience and lots of information that he can share with us. And he was very, very welcome to come on the show, open up the doors, and show us all that he's doing right now. And I was grateful to have him on. So give it up for Sergey.
Doing good. Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I just want to start out just by asking a little bit about how you got started in technology and kind of what drove you made your interest into technology. How'd you get started?
I've always been interested in technology. I started out in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering. Since being a little kid, I was always interested in STEM, and it started out with physics and math and things of that nature, and then eventually got into software development, or rather got into computers. And since I was born in Ukraine, and you couldn't buy a computer at the time, so I started making computers and working on some of the replicas of American technology, and started doing some toy games and things like that. And as long as I can remember, I was interested in that. And that's really how it got me started. It's just like early start.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like the way when I got started in technology. It was mostly because of my neighbor. He would bring home parts. He worked at a company called NCR back then, and he would bring home computer parts. And he's like, "Hey, I want to build this for this charity over here, for this church or something. We want to put together a computer. You want to help me?" And I was like, "Sure." I don't know anything about it. We were building like 8086s back then, and it was just a fun hobby. It's kind of interesting. So you've kind of transitioned from software development technology into entrepreneurship. I want to I talk a lot about that today, because that's one of the areas that I've seen a lot of people in our audience have talked about. How do I start my own business? Or I want to, build an app on the side. Where do I go from that? And how do I begin? What inspired you, or what made you want to start your own company?
I had what you would consider possibly an odd inspiration in being a business owner. When I was 18, I moved to the United States and immigrated with my entire family. And I would consider that to be a first entrepreneurial endeavor. And since then, I knew that I would want to start a business at some point, but I wasn't really sure how. And usually I see it as an issue with technologists. They know a lot about technology, but they're not really sure how to turn that into a business. And so I started very traditionally, senior developer and architect and the director and the CTO, VP of this and the CTO of that, and working for some large and small companies, but eventually always knowing that I would want to diversify and get into the business so I understand more how to run it. And I even debated whether to do a master's degree in computer science or to go for an MBA. I ended up getting master's in computer science and eventually PhD in business. I thought I had mistaken belief that you really have to have a PhD in order for you to do a business, and nothing is further from the truth. You really don't have to. It helps to have business fundamentals, but they don't teach you how to start a business. They teach you what to do when you have $1 billion, but they don't teach you what to do when you have $1. So I started my business thinking that, at this point I know, but I really didn't. And just going through the motions and kind of taking a plunge was one of the most difficult things, because it involved some leaps of And I was starting a family, but by that time I already already had one kid, and it was difficult. But over time, I persevered, and slowly but surely became a founder of a number of successful companies.
So, how did you, or what do you think is important when it comes to technology and being an entrepreneur? I know, from my standpoint, I kind of came into technology on a. I loved it as a kid, and I got to college, and I didn't know what I would do with it. So I went the business route. I got my undergraduate and then my MBA, and then I came back for my master's of software development kind of after the fact. Because I was like, well, I'm working in technology. I don't know why I have this MBA. Let me go back and get my my master's of software development to kind of hone those skills a little bit. Do you think the technology skills are more important, or do you think the person that's in technology today, they're writing code, or maybe they're managing a software team, do you think they need to focus more on learning the business side and the sales side and the product side, or focus, keep their focus and their strengths at technology?
Technology in general is a pretty odd field. And the reason it's a pretty odd field is because when you graduate with a computer science degree, you're going to be the best computer scientist you will ever be, because everything is fresh in your mind. Colleges prepare computer scientists. They don't prepare software engineers. So they don't teach you how to actually do software on a production scale. So that's why it's odd. It's usually the other way around. You graduate with very little knowledge, and if you go to business or marketing or sales, you graduate with very little knowledge, and then you get to know the field. In computer science, it's completely the opposite. So when you go into when you get your first job, you learn how to be a software developer, really how to develop software in teams of people and scale it and do what you need to do to deliver business value. So I feel that colleges, especially top colleges, top public colleges and private colleges, Ivy Leagues, they give you a lot of computer science abstractions, but they don't give you enough of the practical application. And that's why there's definitely that business acumen that needs to be acquired, because you won't be able to develop software without full understanding of the product and what you're doing. So there's a lot of that needs to happen, and a lot more focus needs to be put in college on producing software as opposed to, or rather, producing practical software for business needs as opposed to algorithm analysis and things of that nature, which is certainly needed, but cannot be end all be all. Yeah,
I go back to in my mind, I go back to the 80-20 rule. I think 80% of the people that are graduating really need to learn that practical software that you mentioned, whereas 20% really need to focus on the algorithmic part of the development process in order for computer science to continue to advance. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I've noticed whenever I hire developers and things like that. They'll come in and they'll be able to write this beautiful code and get things to work, but then they're not really solving a problem. They don't understand the problem to solve, and I think that's where they fall short. And I agree with you. We need to do a better job at the university level, getting people brought up to speed prior to starting their jobs.
Absolutely, and again, as you look at what happens and how you start the projects and things like that, it's almost always you by yourself or maybe with somebody else, and it's completely greenfield, which is not what you encounter in real life. It's usually a larger team delivering on something that already exists and trying to maintain what's been put together for years and years and years with minimal documentation. So it's really different from what you learn in school.
And how do you feel like starting a startup, you come up with an idea that's going to solve a problem and you need to build that out, and you don't really have anything to follow. You haven't had anybody else write the documentation or figure it out. How do you go about going through that research and figuring out, what you're going to do?
There's startup building in this day and age is a lot more formulaic than it used to be. And it's also a lot of the new ideas that people speak about there's usually that point of innovation is called an adjacent possible, which is building on top of something that already exists. And you're literally taking something that's on the market and it's already successful, and and looking at the slight improvement. A lot of would-be new entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs, think that the idea has to be so unique and so radical in order for it to work that unless they do come up with that radical innovation, they just cannot start their own startup. So that's one mistaken belief. The other things are basically related more to, hey, what do I do? Because as engineers, our first inclination is to look at the problem and just start writing code. And literally, this is not how product development works. Product development works in testing the market and talking to the customers and seeing what the real problems are, and basically not trying to put yourself in place of a customer, but rather seek real customers. So all of these startup problems are really not engineering problems at first. They're business problems at first, and they have to be solved on the business level. Otherwise, they're just doomed to failure. I've seen quite a few startups who come up with a product and they really have a solution that's looking for a problem rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was Gary Vee or somebody I heard say, probably one of the best advice is if you want to innovate on a product, the best thing to do is to go find a product that's already out there and read the 3-star reviews and find the things that people like and didn't like about them and solve one of those problems. Just one of those problems that somebody didn't like, solve that, and that gives you a starting point.
That's right. You need some kind of wedge into the industry, and it doesn't need to be even the industry that you understand very well. With my current startup, Raken, I don't come from the construction experience, and neither does my co-founder. But we saw, or rather, the idea originated from my co-founder. He saw a particular need, and also how cumbersome construction software has been, and that has been the point of innovation. And then from there, doing lots and lots of iterations on what could work and what could help, and what you would consider 3-star reviews or 2-star reviews or 1-star review. He's got it verbally, hearing from people what they do and just seeing what can be improved.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach, is to get it from the customer themselves. Don't assume that because you like it this way that the actual customer or user of the software is going to like it that way. And talking to people is really a big part of coming up with that strategy or what you're going to actually build. So once you figure that out and you kind of just said, okay, we discovered there are problems, let's say with the construction software that people use, it's really cumbersome. How do you go about, do you start building the product, or do you start the company first, or do you try to get funding? What are the steps involved?
Well, so getting the funding is much further down the road. First, you need to formulate the kernel of the problem and understand how exactly you're going to attack it. What's going to be your minimal viable product, or what I call a minimal testable product. And the minimal testable product is what I can put in front of the customers and start testing and start learning very quickly. So the idea here is, you don't necessarily need to go start a company because even though the company formation, LLC or S corp, are not going to take a very long time, and you should pay attention to it. But that seems a bit backwards. First start interviewing the customers, understanding the problem, and try to assume. One of the things I do is make an assumption that's already built. So if it's already built, what would I do? What would I show them? How would I sell it? And you try to pre-sell it before you actually build anything, write a single line of code. So it starts out almost, it seems like, from the middle of the middle, as opposed to going and getting a lawyer or filling out the forms on online and just forming the company. Usually startups start with 1 or 2 or 3 founders that have an idea, and basically they're founding team, and they start working on that idea. And it's going to be a while before you're going to start hiring anybody else. And so between these founders, they basically formulate and produce the first prototype and try to get the first customer. So
once you have a prototype, you mentioned pre-sales. Do you sell people on the idea? Do you actually take money, or is it more like just, if we had this for this? How do you come up with a price? How do you come up with any of that information?
Pricing is its own very large topic, and there's various strategy in terms of pricing. Now, in terms of pre-selling and selling, It depends where you are on either on a B2B or a B2C side. If you're on a B2C side, you need to be talking to a lot of customers or would-be customers and see if they're potentially would buy something. Because there's a difference between, hey, I like your product versus, hey, I want to buy your product and give you $1 for your product. Now, on the B2B side, a lot of times what happens is you pre-sell the idea and you basically work with your first few customers to develop a product for them, getting in a memorandum of understanding and seeing if they will basically buy the product as soon as it's done. So you get a soft commitment. Mm-hmm. Usually nobody will give you a hard commitment because they haven't seen the product yet, but they'll give you a soft commitment, which is what's called a memorandum of understanding. And designing and building a product for a particular customer is always better because you get feedback right away, and you don't need to take that leap of faith. You're developing the product together with them, and they feel a sense of ownership.
So you're building something basically custom for them that then you'll switch and take it to market.
That's right. So you need to make sure that things are not built in such a way that it will make it very difficult for others to buy, because that's also possible. There might be some super custom requirements that nobody else needs. So you need to make sure that everything you're building is going to be leverageable by others as well.
Okay, so instead of customizing 100%, maybe make it configurable for other people's needs, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every customer.
That's exactly right, because every feature you put in makes the software complex, even if the features are simple. There's such a thing as multiplicative complexity. All features add up, and they end up being difficult. If you build it for one particular customer, others might find it too difficult, and the adoption will be slowed. So you need to concentrate on building what's called a core functionality, or the functionality that's going to be applicable to 100% of your customers.
And when you have these people that are interested in having a solution because they've got a problem and they're working with you, so basically they're giving their time for free, more or less, coming up with the requirements and helping you guys figure out what you're going to be building. Do they also test as a user acceptance testing as well?
They certainly do, and for their participation, they quite often get either hefty discounts or get the product for free forever. Mm-hmm. It's still worth it. The entrepreneurs shouldn't be shy from that sort of deal, because they're basically getting a partner who's fully bought into their idea, and they're working with that partner. So that partner is going to be super valuable going forward, because they'll help you sell other customers just like them, and also give you continual feedback.
Right. Yeah. I guess you also get a good testimonial out of that. You get someone. I know whenever I'm buying software for my company, I'll always ask, can I talk to some of your customers? And you'll get that customer that you can say, yeah, I've got this great guy that we've worked with on building the software. Boom, here you go. Go talk to this person.
You'll get what's called a net promoter, and net promoter score is one of the also referred to as NPS, is one of the key things that these day and age measures customer satisfaction. And keeping an high NPS score is critical for you to continue selling your product. NPS comes in many different ways. It's one component of it is basically reviews. If it's your app, it's the reviews that you get on iOS and Android app stores, and also if it's a web platform, you get just reviews on various platforms that are just dedicated to reviews and application comparison. You need to make sure that those reviews reflect the value of your software and they're good. Otherwise, the customers who are getting more and more savvy and doing market research are basically seeing bad reviews, are going to be put off and are going to buy your software, or your sales cycle is going to be much more difficult.
So if I'm a software developer, I'm working, and I have these people that always come up to me and they're always like, hey, I've got this great idea for an app. Can you build me this app? Can you make this? How many of those do you get? I'm sure you get those all the time too. How many of those do you just completely ignore because they're just, the idea is already out there? There's, I always tell people, I say, well, go search for it first. I'm sure you'll find it. And most people already find it. But if they didn't, how many of those ideas do you actually take serious consideration, or are most of them just kind of like, yeah, nah?
Well, in order to know that something is good or not, it's very difficult because there's hardly any objective criteria. Mm-hmm. So I approach the problems the way the investor would. So when I look at the problem, I first see if it's a real problem, if it's a painkiller as opposed to a vitamin. Is this something that's going to be indispensable in someone's life, either a B2B or on the B2B or a B2C side? So that's one. Number two, it needs to have a sustainable solution. So if you look at my current company, Raken, our solution is to do daily report or help facilitate daily reporting and time tracking on the construction job side. This solution is done via the mobile app. So unsustainable way of doing that would be to send people to the construction job site to do it on behalf of the customers. That's really unsustainable, right? Mm-hmm. So it has no chance, and the company would only grow with hiring more people. That's an unsustainable solution. So it has to be sustainable. That's number two. Number three, it has to be a big market, right? It has to be a big problem that a lot of people care about. If the market is too small, then the startup will not develop. So that's number two, 1, 2, and 3. And number 4, I look at the people who are involved with the company. Do they have a track record of execution? Track record of execution is basically taking ideas and making them a reality. That's one of the most difficult skills and very difficult to judge, but it's easy to judge the results. If somebody has built something in the past, then chances are they'll build something in the future as well.
I think that track record of execution is key. That's one of the things whenever I'm hiring a developer, I'm going to look for that as well, just because a lot of people have ideas, but ideas are worthless. It's how you execute them that matters. I think I heard that from Gary Vaynerchuk. I want to give him another shout out because that's definitely not my quote for sure. But so we have an idea. We've worked with a customer. We've pre-sold it. We've got a product that they're starting to test. We get feedback. We iterate through that. We think we have something that's good enough to go to market. What's our next step?
Well, the next step would be to start selling it. And again, a lot of the B2B type software sales occur basically person to person. It might be cold calling, it might be showing up at conferences, it might be going to like it is the case with my co-founder, going to a construction job site and basically showing the application and getting soft commits. And so the first 100 customers, especially on the B2B side, are founders selling directly. And this is what happens. If it's a B2C side and you need external customers, then you come up with your pricing plans and you put it out there and you start marketing and advertising.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think a lot of people that are transitioning into starting their own business or building a software for a business, they don't realize how much personal sales is important, or how it is to build that relationship and understanding the person, because you don't really buy software from a company, you buy it from a person, whether you like it or not.
That's absolutely true. So people don't just buy software, they buy you. And it's important that everybody understands at every level of the company, you're still in sales. And people like to do business with people they like, right? So it's just one of the key skills in selling anything is really empathy, is to showing that you understand the problem, you understand the customer, and you're specifically there to make their life better. If they feel that they're being actively sold to as opposed to helped, there's going to be a pushback.
I think that's really important. I know I personally struggle with empathy when it comes from a leadership and management perspective, because it's hard for me to see things that I haven't experienced, but I totally get it from a sales perspective. If someone sees my need and they see kind of how I'm struggling, they kind of talk about how they've gone through this before, I am ready to sign up right then. I'm interested. I'm curious. Where if someone just says, well, I've got this product and here it is. Here's all the features. Here's all the bells and whistles. Then I'm just like, everybody's got a product. Everybody's got features. Everybody's got bells and whistles. But how does it affect me? And I think that's where empathy is key.
Absolutely. People don't buy features. People buy help that they're going to get with their problem, right? It's not, the features, it might be the way it manifests itself, but talking about the features of the product hardly ever gets anything sold.
Yeah. Now you guys have grown Raken into, a decent sized app company. You've got sales teams. How is it that you've gone about making sure you had the right person to help sell you? Because a lot of developers may be like me, and they're kind of introverted. They're not really interested in reaching out and selling. How do we get the right person that can sell our product?
It starts out with founders. Again, it's usually never the case that you have a single founder company. You usually have multiple founders, and these founders have different yet overlapping skill sets. When I see a lot of companies struggle, it's basically when multiple engineers start the company and they don't understand how to do sales, they don't understand how to do customer support or customer success. So with me and my co-founder, we have overlapping yet diverging skill sets. He's a lot more on the sales side and customer side, and I'm a lot more on the technology and the product side. Again, it doesn't mean as a technologist you shouldn't understand the product or know and love the product, and you should cultivate very strong sales ethic and just be on the sales calls. And again, this is just I hear that technical people say I'm kind of not good at sales. It's really not about nobody's ever really born being good at sales. It's a skill, and it's a skill that can be learned. Some people are more natural than others are because they have a higher emotional IQ than other people do. We all have different predispositions and aptitudes, but it's a skill that can be learned.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I was terrible at managing people and leading people, and because I didn't understand the people side of it. I didn't understand how to properly communicate with tact to certain people. I didn't understand empathy in general. Trying to put myself in someone's shoes. But it was a skill that I learned, and I was able to acquire it over many years and lots of hard work. But you can do the same thing with sales too. You can acquire that skill. I know when I had my startup, we were trying to get in. We were doing web and things for mortgage companies and such, and we were trying to build tools to help them do rates online and applications online. This is back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and getting involved with them, I had to learn how to speak the language of a mortgage person. I had to talk about finance. I had to understand some of that stuff. And coming from a computer science background, I didn't have a clue. So just learning the language and how to talk to someone and how to understand them, I got them to where they would trust me. They understood because, hey, you're speaking my language. You're able to communicate with me. And I think that's really important. So if you are going into the construction industry, learn about construction. Learn how to talk to those guys. Learn how to communicate with them and partner with someone that may be stronger in that area already, and let that be one of your co-founders that you're going to build this app with. Absolutely.
And as in sales, as in leadership, we don't tend to concentrate on some of the things that would make somebody great, right? So especially in software development, you see a lot of people being promoted just because they're good engineers, but they don't know how to lead teams. They really lack that people management skill and active leadership style and number of things. These are the number of things that would make them successful, and these are the skills that are learned. They absolutely are learned.
Yeah, that was one of my pet peeves because it happened to me. I was a developer and I got promoted to manager, and it was just like one day, hey, now you're going to manage these people. Oh, and by the way, we don't want you to code anymore.
That's right.
What? I don't know how to manage people. I didn't know what to do, and it was a nightmare for a couple of years until I figured it all out, and then I grew to love it, and it kind of became one of the things that I'm more passionate about. But I think that's really important when it comes to anything, when it comes to sales, when it comes to management, when it comes to leadership, any of that stuff can be learned and needs to be cultivated. And I think it's really important when you're an engineer and you're writing code to understand the other skills that you may not be exercising right now, and try to find ways that you can stretch yourself into those areas.
Absolutely. And again, when you see some people who are good at doing anything, really it looks magical, right? Sufficiently complex technology looks like magic. Sufficiently complex or sufficiently honed in skills look like magic. Mm-hmm. One of the tricks is to take whatever the complex skills are and decompose them into a smaller set of actions that could be learned and mastered. And that's really what it's all about. It's to understanding what makes up that mysterious skill that you're so covet.
Yeah, I think that's really good. That's one of the things that I've always tried to tell my team. We have a little code that we kind of work by, and one of the things is try to make the complex seem simple. Find out what is the 20% of the things of this complex task that give you the 80% of the results, and focus on making those things repeatable and very simple. And then you can build from that.
Yeah, one of the guiding principles of my technical teams is to clarify and simplify. It's clarification is really, and if you can't explain the problem simply, you just don't understand it well. A lot of times you talk to the technologist, and so much of the self-worth of the technologist is being derived from having the right answer. And when you don't have the right answer, a lot of times I hear people going into a technobabble, and they're just try to seem credible. It's okay to say I don't know. I'll need to go do more research, and we'll have another conversation. So I see a lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and it's okay. It's okay not to know.
Yeah, so why do you think that is? Because I've seen that a lot, and we've had a lot of guests actually talk about like imposter syndrome and some other things that happen with developers where they feel like they're not quite good enough if they don't have all the answers, they don't know everything. Why do you think that is, and what do you think we can do maybe at the university level to kind of coach people out of that?
One of the things that leads to that is typically within software development, something either does work or it doesn't work, and there's lots of different nuances to go into in making it work. And since there's that emphasis on perfection, which is basically what it needs to be, because the code needs to be just right, and it breeds that mentality that, it has to be perfect. It must be right. And again, on the business side, there's a lot more answers that don't have a definitive answer. They're more or less opinion-based. So I think there needs to be an understanding that there's not a single right way of doing something, and there's many different ways, and it's okay to have an opinion, or even have an opinion that needs more data, and it's okay to say I don't know. That's one. Number two, it's very in the sense it's very easy to reconcile very diverging opinions, because it's just there's a lot of ground for you to go over and to see where the logical fallacies are with the other person's argument. What I've seen very difficult is to reconcile the opinions which are 10 shades of gray different, right? No, let's just do this versus that. So a lot of times software developers tend to focus on these minute differences where it would not matter either way. So another guiding principles I have for the team, 10 shades of gray will work either way. And if that's the case, we should just stop arguing, and we should just pick one of them, time box the decision, and go do that. Also, I think there needs to be more mentality of, hey, I'm the one that's going to deliver this, so I'm the benefit of the doubt goes to the implementer, and we'll support you and we'll fix it if things don't work, but it doesn't need to be perfect for us to go out there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think part of that also goes into senior developers or the team leads, and they need to be, I don't want to think nicer is the word, but probably less controlling when it comes to how the code is written per se. Like you said, 10 shades of gray work either way. I remember several years ago I had a senior developer that he would respond in comments to code like, "Why did you write it like a moron? Here's how you should do it." It's like no. That way works too. They both work. I think that's one of the coaching things that leaders can do to help make sure their team is doing things that way. And
a lot of the imposter syndrome comes from people not understanding how their experiences match up with others. We're always think that our experience is basically in concentric circles to others. So, what I know is a smaller diameter than what others know. But it's not the case. It's always the Venn diagram. I know a lot of things other people don't, but they know a lot of things I don't. And what we talk about is the overlap. And in this way, if I consider everyone's experience as kind of a Venn diagram to mine, that imposter syndrome goes away because they don't know everything I don't. I do, and hence I can bring more some of that knowledge into the group, which is making the group better.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's kind of one of those things where we all have the same size brain. They're just filled with different things.
That's right.
So we've got a product. We've got it. We've got a sales team, or one of our founders is helping out with sales. We've got some sales coming in. We got good support lined up. What's the next step, and how do we iterate and kind of improve and move forward, and maybe even exit this company if we're interested?
Well, one of the things that you need to instill in the company right away, it's the testing mentality. We're not gonna have all the answers. We're not going to know everything right away. And if that's the case, we need to have a framework for us to be testing things. Mm-hmm. So that's one. That's the recipe for improvement across the entire company. Now, various product features and product requests, there's lots of methodologies that come and which way you should be collecting them, and looking at your entire company as an inverted pyramid where the management of the company and the technologists of the company at the bottom of that pyramid, and they're getting a lot of feedback from customer success and sales, and they need to be receptive to that feedback. Now, obviously, again, it's not the squeaky wheel gets all the grease, but it's understanding and trying to combine a lot of the requests which are coming into some of the things which are persistent complaints or persistent improvements that need to be introduced into the product. Now, development of the company to funding and an eventual exit of some sorts is yet another super big subject. Yeah. But at the end of the day, try to put yourself in the shoes of the investor and the would-be buyer. Idea is not a company. Idea is not a product. Product is not a company. So when you have an idea, you need to build it into a product. When you have a product, you need to build it into the company. Nobody really buys products from an acquisition perspective. People buy companies, and there's a lot more that gets into building a company than just simply a product. So you need to concentrate on building a company, a sustainable company that can grow and scale within the larger business.
That's really good. I think a lot of people, when they think of building a product, not necessarily building a company. How much does culture go into building a company?
Culture is absolutely huge. Establishing a culture is it's one of the mistakes I made with my first startup is not to establish the culture right away. And the culture doesn't happen all by itself. You need to actively work on it. So you need to codify what's important to you and how people should behave. And a lot of times when you ask people to define a culture, it will be very nebulous answer. What is culture? And what I feel is culture gets reverted back to just table stakes. You should be respectful to your fellow employees, and you should take showers and don't come to work naked. But that's what I would expect from any person on the street. So that does not make one company's culture different from another. So you need to me, culture is really not values. I care about values. I have kids, but I care more about actions. And actions is really what makes companies culture. And more or less, culture of the company or actions of the company is resolving conflict. And the resolving conflict is not necessarily, certainly why one would hope it's not two people physically fighting. It's basically people having a diverging opinion and how exactly do they reconcile. It's better to put that in place as early as possible, because there's problems where I've seen them arise is basically they all stem from a fact that people just simply can't reconcile opinions that are different.
Yeah, I found that very challenging too when you're leading a team to understand conflict, because I read a book called Herding Tigers, and I had the author on, Todd Henry. We talked about how to fight fair, because he talks a lot about how within a company or a group or a team, there's going to be conflict. And if there's not conflict, then you've got a real problem because you need ideas that kind of do go in different directions. So you don't have an echo chamber. You've actually got a little bit of conflict so you can advance. But how do you fight fair? And that's kind of one of the things that I've always struggled with was, what are the rules and how do you set those rules in place? And his book really helped me with that, with putting up, here's how you talk to one another when you have a disagreement. Don't bring anything personal. Follow these frameworks. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of leaders lack when it comes to building their team.
We have guiding and operating principles for us to fall back on. We operate on +1, -1, 0 principle, and unless you're an implementer of that particular thing, you should be most of the time +1 or 0, either ambivalent of what gets done or +1, very supportive. If you're really a -1, then what that does is you need to have two things. One is you need to prepare to take an execution of whatever it is that you're going to do onto yourself. And you need to show hard evidence, not just I think, but really hard evidence, which is very difficult. So what are you trying to do is not going to work. Otherwise, it's going to be disagree and commit. Because in startups, you just really can't. Well, you really can't just say, okay, well, do it your way. I'm going to do our me foldy thing and just going to sit down and wait and see how it turns out. If it's great, kudos. If it's not great, off with your head. No, we cannot do that because I need your help in order to get it done. And if we need to get it done, then you need to disagree and commit and pull together with me. And if it doesn't work, we'll micro pivot.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Having the burden of proof be put on the negative and not necessarily the positive. I think that's excellent. So what other advice do you have for anybody that might be interested in taking the leap into entrepreneurship that's listening today?
One of the things you should do is to try to understand what you're passionate about and see if you can make a business out of it. Now, again, there's a lot of ideas. People usually struggle with ideas. There's lots of ideas. I think you need to concentrate on technical, and when I say technical, technocratic understanding of how to build a business. And you also need to understand or try to distill that kernel of the idea. And again, you need to put yourself out there and go to meetups and founder dating and just kind of be in that world, because it's very difficult to make inroads when you're outside of it. So that's one. Number two, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to know everything and to talk the talk and know the lingo. It's okay. It's in its own world, and it hasn't developed over a week, and it's not. It's okay not to know things.
I think that's really good advice. How can people find out more about you and about Raken and the things that you're working on?
People can go to our blog that can be linked. That's linked off of our main site, rakenapp.com. And if people want to know about me, I do a lot of speaking, a lot of mentoring. Go to my LinkedIn. There's lots of presentations, and you can download them or get a hold of me.
Yeah, I'll definitely link that up in your show notes. I'll link up your Twitter and LinkedIn and rakenapp.com as well. I really appreciate having you on. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, John. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Hope you guys enjoyed that talk with Sergey, and I hope you got more out of that when it comes to the entrepreneurship side and understanding how to run a business or start a business. If you wanted to transition from a technical leader into a co-founder or something in that role, or even how to be a better CTO or chief product officer or CIO in your company. I hope this is really helpful, and if so, head over to iTunes and leave me a rating and review. That would be great. Thanks so much.